Здравствуйте, and welcome to the Rushing to Conclusions podcast. We're a podcast started by Slavic immigrants who just want to share a piece of our world with the new world. We'll be talking about the Slavic youth experience in the US, so that means we'll be discussing everything from meat jelly to the challenges of taking in two cultures at once. Whatever the issue, we aim to have a conclusion, or a couple, so stick around, put on the tea kettle, and settle in as we rush off to our next conclusion.
Imagine for a second with me that you have found the person of your dreams, and you know that this is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. Things are going great, but you haven't really told your family that you're intending on spending the rest of your lives together. And you're feeling pretty nervous because this person is coming over later to spill the beans about his intentions. You're a girl in this situation, by the way. And things are going well. The person comes over, your boyfriend at the time comes over and spills the beans. He wants to marry you, spend the rest of his life with you. And you really had nothing to be worried about because the family readily accepts the prospect of him being in your family with one little catch. He can be a part of your family only if he marries your older sister, because you are the middle child and your older sister is not married yet. So that's exactly what happens. He marries her and you get to spend the rest of your life living with that, in close proximity with who was once your fiance of sorts, is now your sister's husband. Now, this sounds like the start of some medieval fairy tale, but in fact, this is the very reality that our grandma, had lived through. That leads us right into our topic today. We're talking about Slavic love and relationships.
Yeah, so today this topic is quite popular among all of us, but in order to talk about how it is for us today in America, we should probably get back to the history of things and talk about what it looked like for parents and our grandparents, because just like we talked about in our last episode, in order to understand why things are the way they are today, it's important to take a look at how they were yesterday and 50 to 100 years ago.
Indeed.
So that's what we're going to talk about today and cover a little bit of the history of relationships.
So the goal is we're going to define uniquely Slavic aspects within the love and dating scene. We're going to look through history for that, and then we're going to identify some challenges and maybe some advantages they pose to young Slavs in America looking for a life partner. So that's kind of the overview and the goal. Now, it's worth noting how we find significant others today is obviously very different in 21st century America, because it's the 21st century and because it's America. It's different from how our grandparents related to each other for sure. And, some of it is the difference between village life and like city life. Some of it is the difference between, 21st century and all our technological advancements and, blah, blah, blah. But truly, I think some things are uniquely Slavic, and we want to hone in on those things as we start talking about the historic portion of it, and we start talking about what stands out there.
So what did marriage and dating look like for our grandparents?
I asked my mom about this question, and she, interestingly enough, was also curious about this when she was my age, and she asked her mom that, and literally what grandma said, my mom said grandma just literally laughed at us, and this is what she said. She said, well, we had some good conversations, and then later we got married.
I wonder if that's how they answer that question, because, I don't know, compared to today, everyone just wants to know your love story.
Yeah.
And back then it was more practical and more...
Yeah, there's more to that. They, didn't just have two conversations and then get married. But it's funny that's what they give you. But what stands out for that time period is they didn't have personality tests. They didn't have compatibility tests, all the like compatibility personality lists. They just sort of let circumstances dictate with whom they'd spend their times and lives. I mean, the people you had around you, they didn't have as many choices as we do today, right?
Exactly.
They weren't connected to the web and whatever,
and their priorities were different. Back then, you had to kind of get married to survive in some cases, because you lived in a village with a certain amount of people, and you pretty much knew who was there and what they could offer you, and you had to choose from that pool of people.
And you know what? One thing I was talking with my mom about during that time, she said that it was different, but they knew the people that you were around with, they knew them. They spent their time together, and so they really knew them on a different level than it wasn't a virtual knowing each other. Like the youth, you only had those people around you to consistently spend time with, and so those are the people you'd get to know the most.
Yeah, and a little background. Again, this is coming from families who were raised Christians, and so the church was the biggest part of their lives, and they had youth and church that they were involved with every single day. So that's how they came to have such a tight-knit group of people that they knew so well. Yeah,
and that's a great point, because school wasn't even a big social benefit for them, because they were raised Christian in the Soviet Union, and before then, school was not a place you'd look forward to going as a result of what you believed. So church really became that place for them, and the people around you, the youth around you, was basically the pool of people you'd be getting to know and figuring out if you want to spend the rest of your life with. And it's a true point that you said that it carried more material benefit, the idea of marriage, I guess, rather than today. You don't think about like,
who's gonna put food on the table?
Who's gonna put food on the table? Who's gonna learn? When our grandma got married to our grandpa, our grandpa learned from her dad, my great grandpa, a lot of skills like woodworking, metalworking, beekeeping, just like a lot of interesting random stuff that today would be hobbies, but back then was for survival. Exactly. Back then was for continuing a life together, which kind of puts a different perspective on what their priorities were. They weren't concerned with personality compatibility. They weren't concerned so much as we're able to today. So, in fact, so I looked at some Slavic wedding hymns from that period of time, from my mom, when my mom was young, and they really just carry the idea of going through hard times together, which they kind of were already experiencing on their own. So it's more the idea of who do you want to go through hard times with as a life partner.
And that makes sense, because that's a lot of what their life consisted of. Yeah. Just survival and a lot of hardships. I mean, we make it sound pretty bad, but
yeah, it's in retrospect to how we understand it. My mom tells a story of going to a friend's wedding, and she said this couple, the guy was so shy that he didn't say "I love you" to her until after they got married.
It's kind of crazy.
That's shocking today, but you think about it a different way though. Is she, the bride, like understood him on that level where she wasn't bothered by that? She kind of knew how he was, and she was okay with that. She learned to love him in that way. And today she saw him. She saw his actions. Yes, she
saw what he was doing for her, even though he probably didn't have the right words to say it.
Exactly. He didn't have a shocker. A guy doesn't know what to say. Could you imagine that? That's crazy. And they ended up living a really happy life together. And, today words are more important than that. Like if your significant other doesn't tell you any affection, you can't pull that off today. Like what I'm saying is this success story is not a model for today. But that's how it was back then. And they, the fact of the matter, that's the work, the actions to love is one of the Slavic unique aspects that we're able to trace through history. And parents were another big deal. You know, today we go off to school or go off wherever, you know, we go off to, and you meet somebody and then you bring them back home and they have to meet the family.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And well, I'm sure it was a big deal also when our grandma's first suitor came along and was told, no, you have to marry the older daughter. That was a fun way to meet
Shocker.
the family too. Yeah. But, you know, today we kind of do that. We can find people further abroad and come back. But the role the parents played back then was more, again, material support, was more of like teaching skills to the to-be husband and kind of integrating that person into the family and, you know, working them. They weren't as, I feel like they were able to be more adoptive. I don't know if that makes sense. Like
more hands-on, and
more
set
hands-on.
them up for success.
Yeah, you're doing things together with your future father-in-law or mother-in-law. I don't know. That's the sense I got, at least. And for the Christian groups, again, the parents knew each other. If you're in Christian circles, there's only so many of you, right? So you all knew each other. So it wasn't as huge of a deal as going over to someone's house that you've never met before or something, and you have to just make it not awkward. But they mostly knew each other. So I initially thought the parents would have been a bigger like driving force, more domineering or something like that. But it sounds like the parents were, for the most part, at least in our family's experience, for the most part, encouraging their kids to just get married, not spend too much time figuring life out, not spend too much time, you know, picking and choosing, finding the perfect one. And you know what? A lot of those marriages worked out well. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Hopefully.
What well is, yeah, exactly.
For what we know.
From what we know, they seemed happy. I don't.
But it's such a testament to the fact that love can't just be a feeling that you feel and go off of that. It's, again, an action and sacrifice. And I mean, those couples that made it work only because they put in the work. And we definitely could use some of that today.
Stitch that onto a pillow. They made it work because they did the work. Well, another thing that they had was they were bound by location and technology, which all of us are to some degree, but we are less so today than they were back then. So another Slavic distinctive that they still got around. They still valued finding like-minded people. They still valued finding people who were the Christians from the same faith group. And the parallel for today is for us getting to know other people who are Slavic as well. But we'll get to that in the second part. They didn't have smartphones. They didn't have
Instagram,
Bumble, Instagram, whatever else you will, but they still got around. They took buses from city to city with other youth. They went mainly youth groups. They went from one city's church to another city's church, and it was just like church stuff. It wasn't necessarily like, let's all go hang out with those people over there, but they did that, and they were able to make friends from other places.
I mean, I know youth groups do that now too. So just imagine doing that on a regular basis. And
but that was like a regular thing for them, a way of life. It's just, for us, it's like a hobby or something where we just
a couple times a year.
Yeah.
But so if you met someone in a different city, you had to put more work into that relationship than we do now. I mean, we still do, but they had to pretty much, if you wanted to get to know someone, it sounds like you had to literally move your life to their location in order to get to know them, because you can only get to know someone so much over writing letters to each other.
Which is what someone in our family did. We have a success story in our family where they met at a wedding, and he lived in a different town than she did. They lived in different cities. They met at a wedding, and this is my mom's sister and her husband now. My aunt and uncle, I guess, would be
our aunt,
our aunt and uncle. Well, yes. in reference to myself, my aunt and uncle. And they wrote letters to each other. I mean, what else would you do? You know, they wrote letters to each other. He would come to visit, and you can't really like make spontaneous plans to do that. So he just did. And there's a funny story where he came to visit, and my aunt was studying at a different city. So he went to that city to surprise her, and she went back home for a vacation or whatever reason. And he had to travel back 2 more cities. And mind you, all of that is like public transportation. It's not cars. It's straight up busing it all the way and busing it back. And now that's dedication. And that's how he met the family the first time, because he bussed all the way over from the other city, and he showed up.
Talk about a surprise visit.
And no one was expecting him. And his head was just peeking over the fence, the kalitka.
She saw him.
And
everybody hid.
Everybody hid. Yeah, that's right, because she was the oldest daughter, and everyone else hid. And he came in the house, and, you know, then the other sister stopped being shy and kind of started warming up to them. But my favorite response is from Grandpa when he came home and found a strange boy sitting in his living room. He was just like, "Nah,
not today.
Not gonna deal with it." He just went to the shed and started working on stuff. But the moral of that story is they literally just wrote letters to each other and, you know, spoke to each other occasionally long distance. But they're married now, and they worked on it, and they're happily married today.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story.
Again, not necessarily the model for today, not the norm, but that's another distinctive of how the length Slavic people go through to find the like-minded people. Suffice to say, long distance was harder in some respects, but so anyways, the distinctives, I guess, that are informing our time, that are informing, I feel like are informing where we're at today.
Yeah. That got passed down through our parents to us and our situation.
Which are setting the scene for what we're going to talk about in terms of what we're dealing with today. One of those would be family mindedness. Just more aware of how they fit into the larger picture. That's what our parents, at least, you know, when you're marrying, you'd be aware of the family they're coming from, and, you know, what their family's business is, and what all the dirty laundry in their family is, and what you're taking on. I would say strong home life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, stronger family structure.
Yeah, I just mean strong home life as in a strong emphasis on like getting everything together in the house, and then getting a strong home ready for the family, basically. Family meant a lot. And so being able to provide for a good home life.
Yeah. Another one would be they didn't really prolong the search of someone to spend their life with, or they didn't look for the perfect person that checks all the boxes, and
they became the perfect people for each other.
Exactly.
Right? They became through years of sweat and hardship.
They didn't pick and choose like I think we do that more today because we can.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, I would say. In certain situations, it can be a bad thing, but the ability to really analyze where we're at is a gift to us, but it doesn't mean that we need to spend a ton of time just being in analysis paralysis. And of course, I think the other thing is, well, the church as being the majority social group for the Christian people in the Soviet Union and before then. And that's interesting because that's still sort of the case today.
It's definitely still the case today.
It's still how it is. It's important to meeting someone in a familiar context. And by familiar context, what I mean church, basically. A place where you can bet on finding people who are like-minded for.
Yep. And not necessarily even always for faith.
No, right.
Sometimes just because they are from the same Slavic country or their parents are Slavic, and you know that they grew up with basically the same morals and values that you had, but faith being an important part of that for most people.
Ironically, today in America, in the Slavic America, there are way more Slavic churches than Slavic schools, but it's the opposite back in the Soviet countries. They had a lot more schools than churches, but the schools again weren't a place for social interaction.
Yeah,
you see what I mean? I mean, like it's the
opposite.
It's flip flop.
So that kind of brings us to today.
What does it look like today?
Yeah, today. Since we're talking about churches, a lot of the meeting that happens between couples is through church, and here in among Slavic circles, churches often host a lot of events for the youth conferences.
Now, a youth conference would be like
two-day event, obviously faith-based. There's preaching, singing, teaching.
Lots of youth.
Food.
Youth comes from all over the place.
Yes.
I went to my first one like a year ago. So, I mean.
And it's usually geographically based.
Yeah.
On the location of the states that you're at. So if you're ever looking to go to one, hit us up. We can let you know when those are.
Yes.
And yeah, so those are a great opportunity to connect with people. Also camps, summer camps are a thing. Visiting different youths, just like they did back in the day. So that's a big part of the Slavic American youth culture. It's a incentive also for the older generation to get the younger generation together.
I think that's what's going on. I really do. I think that's the case.
And they make it pretty clear sometimes, actually.
I think so. I think that the older generation just invented this conference deal to keep the Slavic kids together. No, but it's actually a really helpful thing. But it does, benefit the older generation that they get to stay in a familiar environment, that their kids get to meet other Slavic kids. What's interesting to me about this is that our parents and the Slavic parents in the Soviet Union, or the Soviet countries, did this because they lived they were in the same culture as a lot of other youth, but they had different beliefs. So a lot of times there was lack of compatibility. So they had to basically just find others around the church scene. Today, we do it because we live in a similar faith landscape, but a different cultural one. And so it's still the same thing, where it's surrounding the churches and the Slavic community centers, which again are mainly churches. And it's funny because those two things have flip-flopped, but the Slavic response is the same as it was back then as it is today. That priority of finding like-minded peeps.
Your own kind.
So
yeah, and I mean, people still meet in their own churches. It just depends on how large your church is.
Right, exactly.
A lot of the larger churches, people do intermarry, but many do find their significant others across the state.
But it's easier now because there's social media, and there's a lot of social media presence for Slavics to get to know each other.
There are.
There's
one being
a couple.
Yeah, a couple.
A couple being accounts, especially on Instagram, that are just geared towards Slavic people breaking the ice with each other, and
hopefully finding that special someone.
Finding true love. So that's again a different response to the means of today's technology
and opportunities.
Yeah. So let's just go through some ideas, some points we have about the challenges / advantages, mainly challenges that Slavic youths are facing today in finding their perfect soulmate. Some of these do come from the social media conversation prompts on the stories and accounts. So shout out to Slavic Singles and Slavic Mingle as the two accounts I know of. I don't know if there's other ones.
It just gives us a perspective more of what's going on in the minds of people.
It really reflects what's the scene today. So, okay, first, of course, we have to start talking about from the parents' side when you're looking to marry someone. The parents' opinion, do you think there really is a pressure to only marry a Slav or to marry someone in the similar culture today?
From my experience, 100%.
Well, and also we should keep in mind the experience of a male and female.
Yeah.
Could also be different from the Slavic perspective. But in what you're saying, I definitely agree that the pressure is in your experience. Do you think it's a big thing?
Most of the people that I know marry Slavs.
Yeah.
But even though there is the pressure from the parents, which is understandable, they do want the best for their kids, and it's mainly because they want to, I don't know, they always, at least my parents, they think that it'll be harder for me if I marry someone who's not a Slav, just because we didn't have the same background, which it is a valid point. And that cultural preservation is important to most Slavic parents. But even though that pressure is there, I think a lot of Slavs do want to marry another Slav.
Yeah.
I think it's the preferred thing, just because there's more commonality.
It's the default. The default. But again, not everyone.
Yeah.
And there are cases when they don't, and when it works out just fine. But I think you're right. I think I'm picking up on that as well, that that's the default.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I don't know how it is for other people. I wish that there was more openness to marrying outside of our culture, but we'll see. Maybe
change
maybe
the tide.
Change.
Maybe you should change the tide. Do it.
It's an interesting part of our experience, but
and so to note on that, explaining that to American people might make them feel like, oh, it'll never work. If an American is interested, it'll be like, oh, it'll never work, or be really discouraged if they're really interested in pursuing someone Slavic. But I would just say, don't be discouraged. Like, just because this is how it is, but it doesn't mean that that's how it's going to stay, nor does it mean that that's how it should stay. It might not, but what I'm saying is what we're talking about is a reflection of what it is now, but it's not unsurmountable, or it's not unsurpassable at all. Plenty of times where it works out just fine. But again, that is really the reality. And another thing I thought about under this point is that maybe the parents sometimes have a harder time understanding their kids who don't get married as young, who kind of, the kids kind of lean into their amount of choices and don't settle down right away. They kind of, get to know a lot of different people, because that's something the parents didn't do typically. They didn't do as a preferred way of getting to know their partner. They typically did that because things just didn't work out, and you had to keep going and try again. you just need one yes. Really, that's how it goes. So
but it's true, they didn't have that experience, so maybe it's harder to understand for them why we're so picky sometimes, or why we take our time. So it's just different circumstances.
So as a result of that, the parents / older people around you are really interested in helping you out, helping you find navigate journey. They always try to set you up with someone, do they not? I mean, the pressure to get married for people in their 20s,
it's high.
It exists.
And not even, mentioning the 20s is, you're expected to get married by a certain age a lot of the time.
And again, this expectation, in my experience, the expectation doesn't seem like you get sat down and told if you're not married by 24, that's it.
I don't think how that happens like that.
No, the pressure is more subtle than that, but you still feel it.
It's like a cultural weight.
That's a good way to describe it. Like a cultural
It's hard
weight.
to describe, but you can tell just by how people react to people who aren't married or the way they say things to them. You can just tell. But it's funny again. Maybe it's that way because back when they were our age, they were getting married our ages.
And that's totally understandable, I think, from one end. But
it's hard.
It's going through that communication barrier today where it's like, hey, I'm okay. I'm doing fine. As that happens, so you're expected to be married by a certain age. Sometimes when you do start dating, you can get these, like, I don't want to say dating limits, but like dating limits of like how long you can do. I'm just shooting in the dark and theorizing. It seems crazy to us, and my theory is that it's again an implicit thing because of the cultural expectation of you found someone, zачем гулять, why mess around? Like, if you're dating, then you should just go for it. Like, get yourselves ready financially and get yourselves ready to just get married. In talking to my mom and others about how it was like back then, one thing that might inform this is that they didn't really define stages like we do today, like the stages of the friend zone, then getting out of the friend zone, and then dating, getting to know each other, and then dating. No way. They just, because they knew everyone, because they knew each other, they were all already in the friend zone, like. So if anything more is happening, if you're walking her home,
walking her to the bus stop,
which apparently was like one of the like the likeness to Facebook official way of doing it. Well, they're official. They're walking to the bus stop together. Then the expectation is that you're probably interested in like marriage. So it's a case of 0 to 100 sometimes, but it's understandable because that's what it was like back then. So I think maybe that's why today those dating limits or something might be a thing where, what's the point of prolonging things, So if a Slavic guy asks to walk you to your bus stop, count that as a proposal. That's it. I think that's how I will propose someday.
Or if he sits next to you at the conference.
Yes. Oh.
You might think something's up.
Is the same thing. Walking to a bus stop back then is the same thing as sitting next to each other at a conference, because let me tell you.
Everybody's looking at you.
Yeah.
And their thoughts are spinning. Speaking of that, at this last conference, I showed up with you, my cousin.
Yeah.
And had someone just straight up ask me, is this your boyfriend? Yeah. Fortunately, this is my cousin.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's a good parallel.
Yeah, and also take the time to really ask and find out if that is a family member. Oftentimes, it is a family member, and that person is, totally available. So,
yes.
Conference tips.
Also, before you start dating someone, you might want to check if you're accidentally related to them, just because the interwebs of familial relationships among Slavics in the US is large.
Yeah, a lot of Slavics know each other, and if you, upon further investigation, like 7-minute conversation of who both of you know, enough people start overlapping, and you might realize,
you're my fifth cousin.
Yeah, we're related. So that's also something to really check up on. Take an ancestry test together.
First date.
Just do that research, so that way you're
in the clear.
But if you can't find someone here, you can always go back to the Slav countries and find
This
someone
is
there.
true.
So I don't know how prevalent that is, and I don't know how many people like.
It's not a majority, but I know a handful. It's usually gentlemen.
Gentle. Indeed.
The male species. But I know a few guys. I mean, yeah, I don't know how it is for the generations below us, or the people younger than us. It's probably not as prevalent.
Below us, yeah. Below was the right word to use there. They're
but
below.
the ones that are older and, you know, they can't find someone here, sometimes you got to go back and search for your roots.
If everyone is just too mature here, give old give old Eastern Europe a swing. No, but that's true. A lot of people do go back, and it's really cool because then you get to bring someone over here, and you're from the same culture, and it's a little less of the it's a little less of the 90-day fiance vibe where an American just shows up in a Slavic country and tries to. It's different than that, and
No, I don't know. For myself, I don't see myself ever being able to do that just because I'm too American. But it's not impossible. There's always an option.
Always an option. Yeah. That's another thing. It's keeping in line with that Slavic drive, distinctive to find someone like-minded. And if they're not in the next city over, if they're not on the Instagram account, they might be just an ocean away.
Yeah. Well, another challenge on the topic of having a lot of churches here would be different denominations. So just like there's different denominations in America, there's different denominations in the Slavic circles. I think mainly would be Baptists and Pentecostals. But I know there's still like Orthodox Catholics here.
Yeah, but they're a little more removed from like the Slavic evangelical scene. But that's definitely true, and we do know people from those circles as well. But that's the challenge. Once you find somebody on the same cultural level or the same, it's still another thing of like then you have to navigate that. And also should be noted that success stories also abound in certain cases there too. But
yeah, but it's something definitely to consider.
That is true. That is another thing. If you do, I shouldn't say if, when you do find that Slavic or non-Slavic someone, well, at least one of you is Slavic, right? When you or both of you Slavs or one Slav finds that person, you have to figure out how the dating thing is going to go. Again, if we're talking about the making it official, walking someone to the bus stop, or I mean, I'm exaggerating, but making it official, it can be a challenge because our parents didn't have necessarily the concept of like these super defined stages of we have now stopped getting to know each other and we have now begun to court, you know what I mean? Like whatever that is.
We are now boyfriend and girlfriend.
Yeah. There's no such thing. Yeah, you may now do a Bible study together. Like so it was different than that. But in today's scene, stages are would seem to be the way you work, like friends, and then we're more than friends, and then official dating, and then
hopefully proposal.
Yeah. So that's another challenge that a Slavic youth would potentially have to navigate if they're not, especially if they're dating maybe an American individual.
Yeah, that's true.
That's another thing, and that's not always there's something aware of. That's not something you're always like just gonna sit down and break it down to the person. So
I feel like DTRs aren't as prevalent.
Right. I agree 100%. Because if I told my grandma like the concept of a DTR, she would obviously laugh at my face. And I think that's funny.
That is funny. And another thing is that maybe plays a role in that is because the Slavic community is so tight-knit everyone knows everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is going to know when you and that someone are together.
Everybody's going to know.
So maybe that's why people don't always want to tell everyone, just because you don't know if it's going to work out. And you're scared to commit because if it doesn't work out, everyone will know and everyone will talk about it. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's how it happens. You're right. And or things are going well and everyone starts to like plan a wedding already, and then the pressure
you're like,
is
hold up.
unimaginable. That's another thing where combine that with like not having specific, not long term, but like specific stages you go through. If you just start together and everyone's like on board with it, like, oh yeah, you guys are gonna work great. You're like, oh,
and you're like, whoa,
okay, awesome.
It's like you're swimming in this like sea that's too deep for you, and you're just trying to like make it out alive and have a happy marriage.
Yeah, you don't want to be person who can't settle down, then is perceived unstable, and then is like, okay, well, they don't know what they want to do. They're just like messing around. Because if you don't eventually start a family, you could be perceived as you're not too serious about life.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But once you do navigate those tricky dating, not dating stages, and you do get married, another thing that hopefully you work out beforehand, but you'll I don't know what the word is, definitely that you'll definitely face is the gender roles thing. So I guess what's your take on how big that plays of a role in the pre-dating scene? Because so the idea is that females have a specific context and males have a specific context. I mean, they did in the village life. I think today it's not so like hard and fast in terms of like,
it's definitely more controversial nowadays.
Exactly.
Even among our circles.
Yeah. So that's and that's the thing is if some I don't know what do sometimes guys come off as wanting that.
Some guys just want a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
And I don't know how true that is of everyone, but from the things I've read on Slavic singles,
it's a priority for them.
Some guys just want a girl who can make some good borscht.
Yeah, well, that. But
no, but I don't want to hate on those people. But I don't know where that stems from.
Yeah, I think partly maybe just because the guy wants to feel like the provider, because you hear the stories of your grandparents and even your parents tell stories of like, the kids going off to war at like, however old they are and doing all this crazy stuff. And maybe there's some of that still left over where the guy wants to feel like I'm the provider, I'm the protector, blah, blah, blah. So that means this. And that's the thing where it gets tricky is there's maybe nothing wrong with wanting to feel that way. But then if all you want is a stay-at-home mom.
I think there's like, stay-at-home moms are rock stars. Like it's such an important part of life today.
Yeah.
But if it goes too far and the guy doesn't see the woman as equally valuable or, capable of other things, then I think that's where the problem lies. I think
just make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah.
Beforehand is the thing. Whatever it is, whatever the setup is you want to do, make sure in your pre-dating phase or dating phase, whatever you define it as, make sure that you define that. So
yeah, just be on the communication.
Communication. And another thing, well, it looks like you had that written down. You want to expound on that? It's just a random point, but maybe someone else out there feels like this. Kind of going back to the wanting to marry outside of your circle. For me, something that I would look for in a guy is someone who's willing to step out of the Russian circle. Not step out as in abandon and forget, but are they able to
have they educated themselves on what life is like for people who aren't Slavic? Because I think a lot of the times we do grow up in a Slavic circle, and all we really know is our Russian friends or our church friends, and it's hard for us to assimilate.
Yeah,
I guess with people here in America, and I think that's like it's an important part of just growing as a person. So
you're saying you want someone who can navigate both?
Yeah,
someone who can navigate both.
Someone who, I don't know, I guess isn't ignorant of what life is like for people that aren't Russian or Slavic.
Yeah, who can have empathy.
Yeah, who are educated about issues here and.
Well, and
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it does, and that's important. See, that's important regardless of culture, but
that's true.
But it's more so important to define that here as well. Like if this individual is capable of navigating both things. So, but that's another quality of, it's another Slavic, I guess, distinctive is having to be challenged with navigating both things. Again, you think about the parents and you think about the grandparents in the Christian circles, they still had to do that even though they lived in the same cultural space. They had to navigate the belief differences. But so I define that as like a Slavic distinctive where you have to navigate both scenes. So that's the case today. Is you have to do that too. So another really important part is when you do get married, you can't overlook the wedding ceremony.
No,
you can't.
It's a pretty big deal.
Slavic weddings are a much different experience than American weddings. If you've never been to a Slavic wedding before, find your local Slavic friend, that Eastern European person in your life, and you go to the next wedding of theirs or their families with them, because it's an experience to be experienced. And I said that in a good way. Like it gives an interesting perspective, because you know what, you've been to more than I have.
More than my share.
You think you've been to a few. What do you think about the main differences? What do you think? Somebody who's never been to one and goes.
Oh man, this is hard for me because I've never been to an American wedding. Can you believe in 16 years of living in America, wedding? I've never been to an American wedding. My first one coming up here in a month.
Okay, wow. So hey, we're gonna do a follow up and talk about what you think is different. Seriously.
I mean, from what I've seen, man, it's hard to even.
It's overall, I think if I had to
Well, how many have you been to?
Oh boy.
Have you been to quite a few American weddings?
Yeah, I've been to, well, I'm not like a wedding guy, so I wouldn't like count how many I was, but I've been to
You've been in part of a bridal party.
Yeah, most of the weddings I've been to are American weddings for sure. Yeah.
So it's the opposite for me, so.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll speak to the American weddings. The American weddings, the main difference I would see is the audience participation. The audience members are more spectators than American weddings. They're more just kind of there to support, give that moral support, and then party it up right after. But Slavic weddings are different because the audience is like actively participating in them through different things like poželania, through different things.
Just like wishing the couple. Well, for context, there's usually like an MC, like a specific person who is the host of the reception and runs the whole thing. And it depends on the wedding. It depends what person the couple chose to do that, but a lot of the time it includes a lot of singing. There's usually a group that sings, usually like Russian worship songs or, love songs. There's, like you said, poželania, which is like mini speeches, or I don't know, I guess for an American wedding it'd be like a toast or something, but there's usually no alcoholic beverages at Russian weddings. So it's like a mini speech, just come up to
I should preface that there's no alcoholic beverages at like a Russian conservative Slavic weddings.
Yes.
Make no mistake.
Yes.
the culture.
Outside of that, there's definitely
make no mistake.
alcoholic
But
beverages,
we're talking about a specific environment.
Yeah.
No.
But
Just overall, they don't tend to spend as much money on a wedding.
well, the other thing I was gonna say is there's usually a lot of games, like more entertainment for the couple, like games for them to play, and then games that include the audience. So sometimes there's like a lottery, like people will buy tickets and then that money will go to the couple, and then people will win like door prizes, I guess.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Or sometimes people buy the cake, so there'll be an auction.
Oh my!
They'll
gosh.
auction off the cake.
Wow.
I just know these things because my dad used to be one of these MCs. He's done a bunch of weddings, so yeah. So that's kind of what it looks like for the reception part. But yeah, that's you were gonna say.
Yeah, they don't seem to spend as much money on that, and a big part, one of the biggest part is food.
Oh, for sure.
Every Slavic mom's worst nightmare at a wedding is that food will run out. So you better know that there's enough food to feed everybody. And but that's a great point to the Slavic, I guess, thriftiness of it.
Oh yeah, DIY everything.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of things, and I think that's why it tends to be a lot cheaper, is because you don't hire a wedding planner.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cater most of the time. The catering is usually people from church who they have experience making a lot of food, because Slavic churches tend to have a lot of
bulk
luncheons. Yeah.
Make it in bulk.
What else? Food,
the
DIY,
decor, and the decor. And the thing is, though, like when you say cheap, we mean cheap like price wise, not the insane wedding prices, but it usually turns out beautiful.
Yeah, you
wouldn't know.
Wouldn't tell.
You couldn't tell that it's
really
not
tell.
like some.
They don't cheapen out on like the quality.
Yeah.
They find ways to make it good but cheap, inexpensive.
Yeah. Here's an idea: a Slavic wedding planner that makes the wedding party do everything themselves and gets paid for it. I think that's gonna be my next side hustle.
Oh man,
because
but that's true.
That consultant, that Slavic wedding planner, can tell you how to do everything and save money and still make it look beautiful. And that's really what you need to have. But it's true. You're right. In comparison to how much money they spend, it's on average. I would bet, if I was a wagering man, I would bet any money that on average, Slavic weddings cost a lot less than American weddings.
Yeah, me too. But that's true. That's a good point. I've had that idea that the Slavic community needs a wedding planner who knows how to make these weddings the way we do them.
The Gordon Ramsay of Slavic weddings. That's for real.
Anyone looking out there for a career, this might be your calling. I'd hire you.
I would hire you for sure. With all that being said, I
think it's time to
do some conclusions.
Rush off to some conclusions.
Nice. Yes. So we talked about the challenges. I think for the conclusions, let's talk about some advantages.
Yeah, like positives. We've covered a lot of challenges, but there's still positives to get out of this. Yeah,
I'll go first. I think the advantages. One of the I should stop saying advantages. It's really not an advantage in any way. It's more positive. I think that. Long distance relationships, you can grow as a person through challenges, and things like that. Now, again, you have to take that with understanding what time was like back then. But I think the positive here is not necessarily the long or short distance of it, but the willingness to work together, the willingness to work despite difficult circumstances.
Yeah, it's what you're gonna gain through having to go to the challenges of a long distance relationship.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about long distance relationship. What I'm thinking more about is that it's already ingrained in the I guess the culture of the older generation. And it's been around in our culture where you're willing to put in work. You're willing to put in work through actions and through if you have to go through a different city to visit this person, like, because that pattern is around back then, I think it's an advantage for us today.
Yeah.
Not advantage, I mean positive for us today, where you get more like-minded people that do the same thing. So the odds are, if you're in a long distance relationship with that person, that they have reciprocity. They'll be more likely to have reciprocity if they're from the Slavic.
Yeah, you have more access to, again, like-minded people, more connections. It's easier to, because we're such a tightly knit community, it's easier, I guess, in some ways to identify people who are like-minded.
But it's not a guarantee. You can't, again, we're talking general trends here, so you have to take this all with I guess, a grain of salt.
But another positive, I think, is that the legacy of the multi-generational family structure mindedness versus, like, right now we're more individual, thinking about our happiness, our future. But I think what was passed down to us is that to think about your family's legacy and your future children, and how you want them to be able to connect to your past.
Yes.
And that preserving that culture is, I think it is a positive. And because I think we often don't really value the gift of being able to have two cultures and being able to speak two languages. I think it's a gift a lot of people probably wish they had.
Yeah.
So I think it's a positive thing if you're able to carry that on and to pass it on, and through a marriage and through your kids.
Yep. And to make a note on that is, preserving or celebrating this culture does not in any way mean you have to exclude others. So don't get that feel, and don't get that idea that that means you can't have other cultures part of you, or no Americans or no other people, because actually if we believe that, well, if we know that a culture is strong enough to survive, then it has to be able to live alongside others and adapt, take the good things and things like that. So celebrating that Slavic culture does not mean do it without American people as being part of families either. It very much is inclusive. But I wanted to make that note to say that what we don't mean by that. You
got to have balance in it. You can't. It's important not to become prideful in your own in what you've been given.
Because you need others. You need others.
It's a cool way to diversify and to grow.
Yeah, it's cool because Slavic countries have a ton of history, and it's something that should be willing to share and should be willing to subject that to learning from others. So I think those are the main conclusions that we had.
I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, I think so. Really want to say thank you everyone for listening. Please follow our Instagram page for more updates and content. We are interacting on there, and would like to really make that somewhere where we can, get more information and interact and kind of build more people into the conversation. So check us out.
Yeah, it's at Russian to Conclusions podcast on Instagram. We appreciate all the love and support.
Yeah.
And
thanks
for following along with us.
Everyone who's growing with us as we're figuring out how to do this. Just today, I realized I had a microphone flip backwards. So here we are.
It's been a fun process.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, stay creative. Thank you for listening. And as always,
ciao. Ciao.